vTalk, a podcast by vTech Solution.
Again, my name is Mike Pereira. Welcome to vTech Federation. vTech Solution, again, we're a federal integrator here in Washington, D.C., headquartered right here off 11th and 8th Street, focusing the state, local, and federal markets. So we are blessed today to have Mr. Josh Elliott with us. Josh Elliott is the COO of Modsy. Modsy is an emerging AI company in the marketplace doing some amazing things. Josh, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And next we have Mr. Mark Wazer. Mark has been in AI longer than I think I have been in the industry and written books on AI as well. And we are blessed to have him. He's a subject matter expert on artificial intelligence. Mark, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Wonderful. Okay. Well, to the audience, the folks that have been with us here in the past, we will have a series of questions for these fine gentlemen and then open it up to the end of the meeting for questions and answers that you guys may have out there, and any insight onto what some of these topics are. So I'm going to jump right into it. With that said, Josh, the first question is for you, and that is, what key trends are you currently seeing in the AI ML industry, and how might these trends impact the federal government?
Well, thank you, Mike. Thanks also for the invite for today's conversation. I think it's a very important conversation to continue to have, and it doesn't stop here. Happy to have conversations or strategy consulting sessions with anybody if necessary. But to your question, I think there are a lot of actually really cool opportunities where artificial intelligence is being applied, and some that come off the top of my head real quickly. The digital twin space, you're seeing that really start to take prominence, and I know that organizations in the Defense Department are certainly starting to take an opportunity or take a step towards that type of solution. Intelligent RPA, if you think about all the different types of automation that exist or the opportunities for automation, and then applying or augmenting that with artificial intelligence or machine learning, I think we're just going to make that type of solution space that much more powerful and improve decision making. I think there's also opportunities to leverage hyper-personalization that you're starting to see in the e-commerce space, and that could be applied not only in internal operations, but it could spill over to things like training and education that every federal employee has to take, and being able to personalize the curriculum that they see or have to go through, and also the materials that are provided to them, I think is a huge opportunity. And then we could not talk about today, AI-powered assistance or content creation opportunities. Whether that's through chatbots that are, going to become and make conversations sound more and more human and personal as possible. But also, the large language models that are in vogue today, spurred by projects like ChatGPT. I think there's huge opportunities there. And then if you look at the financial sector and the fraud prevention type of capabilities that they're putting in place that are really powered by artificial intelligence and machine learning, I see that as a huge opportunity for detecting usage patterns and or anomalies that can be found extremely fast and reduce potential fraud, waste, and abuse throughout every aspect of government. But the one industry trend that I think is most exciting to us, because this is really where Modsy is focused, is, I'll start with an analyst statistic, but, by 2025, analysts are starting to predict that more than 75% of enterprise data is going to be collected, captured, and processed at the edge. And that's why at Modsy, we believe edge is the future of artificial intelligence, and being able to move AI and machine learning models as close to the users and devices that need it, rather than having to do all that processing centrally in a data center or cloud, is critical for decreasing reaction times, but also enabling real-time, near real-time decisions. And I think having that edge-centric approach allows you not only to filter critical data locally, but it reduces latency. And it also means you can deploy AI and machine learning models anywhere, including and beyond the cloud. So we're really excited about that.
Excellent answer. And then one thing I did want to mention too, Josh, if both you and Mark, want to put your or best contact information, best way to reach you in the chat, we will make sure that there's a call to action for all of these members as well to access you. But if you wanted to do that step as well, just so you can, there we go. Josh is already on it. Wonderful. Mark, any follow up on that? Any thoughts to what Josh just said?
Sure. One different type of trend is the increasing amount of pushback there is from the public in terms of bad decisions made by these automated systems. And I think that's going to have a huge impact on the government and implementation and everything else. A lot of these machine learning systems, it's claimed that they're inscrutable. You have no idea why they're making the decisions they're making. And if you try and study the systems themselves, that's certainly true. On the other hand, they are explained if you analyze the data that they were fed during their training. You can do an awful lot in terms of explanatory power, explaining where something went wrong, also by post hoc analyses. So this is one of the things that I think the government is going to be forced to answer with. And this is going to take a lot of time. AI is increasingly losing credibility. You've got all these stories about how people were mistreated. And of course, there are the problems with ChatGPT. So credibility is a very, very important trend that the government is going to need to hop on, or it's going to be a serious pain point for implementing machine learning.
Yes, and that segues me right into my next question. Thank you, Mark. And this is for you to take the lead on here. What should federal agencies prioritize? We always hear these new hot trends, right? The cloud of 6-7 years ago, and now AI and ML and RPA. What should federal agencies prioritize when creating an efficient process to train their internal teams to implement the upcoming AI and ML trends within their agencies?
So what's really desperately needed are data scientists. The AI only gives advice based upon its data. It's exactly as good as its data. And most of the data is pretty much garbage. There is some skill in implementing a machine learning system in terms of the logical architecture, but it's much more about the data. I've got a great story about a machine learning system that we did for the Air Force over way too many years ago, way back in the 80s, when you actually had add-in boards for your PC for the computations. This was for the Air Force. We were doing diagnoses of pilots. G-forces are bad on hearts, and they would take thallium images of the pilots' hearts and then send them off to doctors to see if the pilots needed to be grounded. The problem here was that their data that they were attempting to work with was very, very problematic. When you work with a neural network, there are a lot of things that you can do for explanatory power. For example, you start your network with a very small number of nodes, and you can feed your data only to some nodes, so you can basically do principal component analysis. When you have a little bit more complex network, you can actually do much better cross-correlation analysis than you can just by the standard methods. If everyone remembers with neural networks, the fact that a one-level network can't handle the XOR problem, well, all the matrices that you use to do your cross-correlation analysis can't do it either. So neural networks can get a lot of information out of your data that it's difficult to have gotten by other methods. And we learned a lot about their data. We actually pinpointed the fact that their data changed radically at a given time period. And they went, oh yeah, we changed our pre-processing. We figured out when they had new doctors come on, because it always changed for the better, for the worse, the average, because there are only 3 or 4 doctors. Unfortunately, what we determined most importantly was that the doctors were fundamentally analyzing on the wrong features. We were able to train our network up to about 96% predictive power of how each individual doctor would diagnose a given image, but they were radically different between doctors, and worse if we subtly manipulated the images so that they had just a slightly higher normalized value or just a slightly lower normalized value. We could get the doctors to give the opposite diagnoses than they gave previously. So all of this is to say, you need to know your data. You need to be able to improve your data so that you can actually make good decisions. And you've got to be able to explain your data. And as I was saying previously about the trend of pushbacks, this is where they have to focus currently.
Right. No, that's interesting. And yeah, it's that's a great point in terms of the data sets and how important those are. And you know, I mean, that goes back to your original point of the data scientist, right? Josh, love to get your thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, certainly. I think, yeah, I agree with what Mark said about the data. I think it also boils down to use case selection. I think understanding and focusing in on use cases that may already have the data or have a sensor that is streaming data live, I think is certainly some place to start. I think another thing that I would focus on is the life cycle. All of these algorithmic models have a life cycle of clearly, you know, data labeling being a part of that, the training of the model in production, and then the retraining of that model, and being able to put in place the tools and the workflows to make sure that cycle is continually evolving that model into new versions and improved versions based on existing data that needs to get relabeled, or new data sets, I think is also equally important to put in place.
Yeah, well said. Okay, Josh, the next one is for you. How do you see, Josh, the current regulatory environment affecting the adoption and deployment of AI ML solutions in the federal government?
Well, I think, you know, certainly a great question. A lot of recent activity right now in discussion in response to like what we talked about, the rapid advances with generative AI technologies. You know, to date, there's really some unclear regulations that exist, but you know, you see the U.S. government really starting to invest in non-regulatory type of activities, whether those are risk management frameworks, evaluation techniques. I know that we work a lot with you know, surveillance and facial recognition software, so there are evaluation techniques and scores for those types of algorithms and models that you need to be aware of. And then not to mention, you know, the funding that they're directing towards AI research. I think all these things are critical. I know that, you know, just in my readings, the administration is through the Department of Commerce is, I think it's the National Telecom and Information Administration or something like that, is seeking public comment on what measures could be put in place. And I know that there's also large technical companies out there starting to lobby different legislation that speaks to how you can certify the compliance of the AI systems. And I really like how the government right now is taking a sector-specific approach and pushing some of the responsibility down to the federal agencies in this distributed fashion, because, like I said, it's really use case dependent and specific. And I think, some use cases could have insignificant consequences if the AI or machine learning produces a wrong result, while others could have serious implications. And I think by looking at it through a risk management lens, things like privacy, security, fairness, even the transparency and explainability that I think, Mark, you were alluding to, I think all these things, including the third-party risks associated with the data that they're using, as well as who's building the model and training it, I think they're all important factors to consider when thinking about the regulatory space as well. And if I take a look at or think about past lessons learned from other emerging technologies, and I think to Mark's point about pushback, I think if the government can put in place frameworks that build confidence in these dimensions, I think you'll get the trust associated with the technology and it'll become more successful. So that, I think there's a huge opportunity to not stifle innovation as well. And I think as long as we're looking at those different dimensions, we are smart about the responsible implementation of the AI, we can get there.
Yeah, well said. And I mean, it's an exciting time to be in this space and to see how quickly things are moving, and to see what's always coming around the corner, right? So, no, thank you for your thoughts there, Mark. How about you? What are your thoughts around this regulatory environment?
Sure. Josh pretty much covered the waterfront. However, the one thing that I would add is the carrot. The federal government has a ton of funding, and they can guide a lot of the direction by deciding where to put their money. And I think that that's often as important as regulation.
Good point.
Yep, well said. Okay, great. Well, Mark, this next one is for you here. In your opinion, what are some of the most promising applications of AI, ML in the federal government, or coming to the federal government today? And because that's kind of a two-sided question there.
Right. So in one sense, that's a tough question to answer in anything except the vaguest terms. And the reason why is because there are so many use cases.
Right.
You name it, there's a use case. So for me, it's actually worthwhile to take a step back and again, reiterate what these systems fundamentally can do. They're good at making decisions if there's great data on how decisions have been made in the past. They're very, very good at detecting anomalies, detecting when something is wrong. They can't really necessarily tell you what to do about it, but all of the imagery, particularly the medical imagery, they really don't identify the things that they're generally claimed to identify. What they really do is they identify what's unexpected in the image. And this also is very good in terms of analyzing military data. It can identify things that are there that don't belong. That there is a little bit of the network, if it's a neural network, that also ends up being dedicated to, once it's found an anomaly, to possibly identifying it. But the vast majority is that anomaly detection. And that really is what a lot of the military stuff relies upon. And other than that, it's just a question of what you can dream up, because fundamentally human beings, try and recognize what's going on, the anomaly detection, and they try and make decisions. And really, machine learning is applicable almost everywhere.
Right. Yeah, I know that's a good point. I mean, I think, and Josh, I'm going to turn to you here in a second, but I mean, I think Josh, talked a little bit about it as far as, around certain things like RMF, and I've seen it used recently over at Treasury where they're scanning certain types of documents with it. I've seen it at the ITSM level as well. I mean, to your point, Mark, in terms of, being able to point out anomalies, in these different ITSMs and those type of things. Josh, I'd love to just get your thoughts on it, just to kind of wrap this.
Yeah, I mean, not to repeat what Mark said, but I'll foot stomp the pattern recognition. I think, the use cases or the scenarios where you've got routine activities being performed that could be performed in partnership with the machine, intelligent machine, I think are very promising. I'll also go back to what I said earlier about use cases. I've done a lot of work in the transportation and air traffic space. Safety being critical, I would not pursue something that has a high mission criticality or safety component to it in the near term.
Right.
Start with something a little less risky or has lower consequences of implications. I do think there are a lot of promising capabilities. I know we're working with some partners that are building on top of Modsy to put in place solutions to improve contact center operations and take advantage of the corpus of data that exists to improve processes there, but also improve the services that the citizens are receiving to get them faster. So I think it's it again depends, but it's truly open in terms of what AI and machine learning can benefit and where you can find those efficiencies.
Yeah, I think that's a great point too, and I think it's also kind of it's the messaging behind AI too, right? I mean, AI in the beginning was, everybody's thought around it was the replacement of instead of enhancing, right? So I think you bring up a great point there too, Josh. I mean, I think folks once the workforce looks at it more of this is going to enhance my day-to-day activities versus this is going to replace my position. I think we'll see a lot more movement in that direction as well. But thank you, Josh. Okay, next question is for you, Josh. To lead off with, what challenges, and I think we just talked a little bit about this, but what challenges do you see in implementing AI ML solutions within the federal government?
I wouldn't just limit this to the federal government. I think there are challenges across the board.
Well said.
I'm going to focus in on the implementing verb there, because I think there are a few areas, maybe another, that I would focus in on. I think one being the algorithm or model's complexity. We talked about the importance and the sufficiency of high quality data in training the models. I think that's a critical thing to consider and a challenge to overcome. I also think that you're seeing a lot of data scientists training models in very pristine cloud environments where everything's perfect. We know that that's not the real world. We know that most models don't necessarily live in that space, especially if you're talking about the edge. We talked a little bit about monitoring and management of those models. So if you start thinking about it, imagine an organization that has hundreds or if not thousands of different models in their enterprise, and being able to manage and monitor all those different versions. I think things could get pretty complex there. The next category that I would comment on is really around deployment. I can't tell you how many times I've been in conversations with customers, and their first question is, what do you recommend, or where do you recommend I deploy these models? Because there are nuanced differences to that. I think you have to think about the infrastructure that you have. A lot of organizations that don't have modern infrastructure in place to be able to, that have the suitable processing capabilities for running the inference of these models. I think paying attention to what your infrastructure posture looks like is important. Networks are expensive to operate and maintain. I think those are different dimensions that you have to think about. And then most importantly, with respect to deployment complexity, making sure that you understand how this is going to integrate into your existing systems and workflows. This is one of the areas where I think a lot of pointed systems are failing because they're not composable in both the business and technical aspects. And I think in terms of modern architectures, organizations that aren't thinking composability in terms of being able to piece different parts of the end-to-end life cycle together, may find themselves in a place where they either have to rip and shift or put in place a new architecture in the future. And then, Mark talked about talent. I agree. There's a lack of talent out there, hard to find and equally hard to keep.
Yes.
In terms of both the government, but also the contracting community that's supporting the government, and being able to recognize, have that digital literacy, both at the end user perspective, but also at the leadership perspective, is critically important. If you don't understand how the data is being used or what the data is resulting in terms of a decision, you're going to find yourself, making decisions based on, data that may not be in line with what you're trying to do, your outcomes. And then to the point about overcoming resistance, I think, change management is always important with any emerging technology. But being able to introduce to what you said, Mike, about the augmenting as opposed to replacing the human, I think that is the messaging that's going to succeed.
Right.
And then if I were to just one more area, I think time kills all deals. I think, with the promise of AI and machine learning, you've got a lot of leaders that want to see that return, want to see the value pretty quickly. And then they get disenfranchised very fast if the solutions don't produce the expected results. So I think, paying attention to that dimension is also equally important.
Well said. Well said. Mark, your thoughts?
I think everyone needs to listen closely to what Josh said. There's a lot of extensive, up-to-date experience there, and I couldn't have said much of it better.
Wonderful. Thank you, Josh. Okay, next question is for you, Mark. How can federal agencies measure the effectiveness of their AI MLL systems, and what matrices should they use to track performance?
So this is a fairly standard question in terms of, obviously, you want accuracy, you want upkeep, uptake, sorry, not upkeep. You want to make sure that it stays at a reasonably accurate level. I would actually argue that your machine's accuracy should always be increasing. If the data engineers are doing their job, they're picking out more nuances, they're picking up more data that they could be collecting. A machine learning system, or rather the data behind the machine learning system, should be constantly improved. And really, you should be able to track an upward trend in a number of these things. And again, this gets back to minimizing the pushback. There's also the fact that you can apply various anti-biasing algorithms as well. And all of these things, user acceptance is also an important criteria. And it actually is somewhat contrary to accuracy at times. If previous decision-making was biased or otherwise deficient, the way you do metrics on a machine learning system needs to be very carefully evaluated, because if you just go to see if it matches previous decisions, that isn't necessarily what you want.
Right, right. Josh, any thoughts there, sir?
The only other one I would add is outcome. I mean, you started an investment in an AI or machine learning system for a particular outcome, and if you're not achieving improvements or efficiencies or effectiveness improvements in that system, I think that is something that needs to be monitored pretty regularly through every stage of the systems engineering process.
Yes.
So very, very important there.
It's funny you say that. I recently sat on a panel, and I won't say what agency it was because I don't want to call anybody out or have anybody unnamed. But I recently sat on a major federal agency where the CTO said just that. The biggest challenge they have with implementation of any new system is to measure the effectiveness of those tools on the workforce. So that's a great point, Josh. Thank you very much for that. Okay, all right, next question. Josh is going to lead with you. What are some of the biggest misconceptions about AI, ML in the federal sector, and how can agencies address them?
I think we touched on a number of potential misconceptions. I think, one that I'll highlight, I've heard once you build the model, it'll work in the real world. And Mark's chuckling because he knows that's not the case. There's a tail to the model world life cycle.
Right.
You have to constantly focus on retraining that model to improve those metrics that we were just talking about. And there's a cost associated with that, total cost of that ownership. I also think there's been, and we touched on this as well, a lot of focus on the data side of the pipeline and making it usable to train and build models. I think some organizations are missing an opportunity to focus resources, like I talked earlier about creating that's circular pipeline or infrastructure needed to operate those models in production, but also collect information to then retrain the models. I think another misconception is that AI models will produce perfect results every time. We haven't necessarily brought up the word performance drift, but models will become non-performant over time, whether that's due to new data or a changing environment in which that model is operating. And you have to have, we talked about talent earlier, you have to have the talent that's able to recognize and put in place the proper monitoring of those models and understand how to improve and explain why a model performed a certain way. So there are a lot of capabilities that are coming onto the market in terms of monitoring and observability, as well as explainability capabilities. I think post-mortem analysis is going to become important as well in terms of what happens. And then Mark talked about the need for data scientists. I think, having an army of PhDs carrying that data science title may be necessary if you're building from the ground up. I think there is a lot of promise to some of the commercial solutions that exist in the market that are catered to the less technical in terms of, providing a no-code or low-code solution. And I think that's probably a trend to the first question of this conversation today. That's probably a trend that we're starting to see. So access to these types of solutions is going to become more prevalent and more ubiquitous. And I think we're going to see more citizen level type of data scientists emerge over the coming years. And I think utilities that will help take the painful jobs of the data scientist or the painful jobs of the developer that's using the results of those models will come into the fold as well. And then we talked about use cases. There's no use case that's too small for this. I think people are looking for the big bang type of use case that's going to come in and save the world for their agency. And I think, and to the points made earlier from both Mark and myself, you got to get your foot in the water and start somewhere. And there's plenty of use cases to start from if you're doing it responsibly. Right.
No, and that's interesting too. Some of your thoughts on just the future challenges as well that a lot of folks aren't thinking about. So that those are great points, Josh. Mark, any thoughts that you'd like to add here to what Josh said?
Sure. I really liked Josh's point about what is effectively automating data science. It's a trend that I'm not seeing, and it's a trend that is reasonably straightforward and really, really should be happening. That could definitely accelerate a lot of these efforts tremendously.
Yes, wonderful. Well, and that's why Josh is a leader in an amazing AI firm, right? So thank you, Josh. Okay, Next question. This is going to be for both of you. But I will start with you, Mark, and then Josh will get your thoughts on it as well. How do you see AI ML solutions evolving to address? Can you go to the next one? I'm sorry. Maybe I'm one question ahead. I'm sorry.
I think that is the 8th question. One of the things that I should have added to the last question about misconceptions, though, is the fact that many people believe that AI is much more intelligent than it is. I mean, we've even seen comments like ChatGPT has a soul, that AI is going to, become sentient and replace all of us. It just is not going to happen with the current tools. And yet there's also a lot of fear around that. So that's another misconception that it would be helpful if that could be addressed.
Okay. Yeah, no, I agree. And there was an 8th question. Let me just ask it verbally real quick because it looks like we're having some technical challenges. And Mark, it kind of just talks to what you just said. How do you see AI evolving to address some of the security and privacy concerns over the next few years? We'll pick a 5-year window.
So I'm going to start out by being a crackpot.
Okay,
and I think that you're going to see human level learning systems very quickly. We've sort of reached a point where a lot of the infrastructure is there. It's scary how much knowledge that ChatGPT is drawing upon. And it's scary how similar systems are becoming very good at identifying images. We're finally reaching the point where pretty much all of the data input and the low-level abilities that animals and humans have been close to replicated. And you don't necessarily need a fully thinking entity in order to take advantage of routine tasks. You don't have to think things through necessarily if you've got, for example, ChatGPT telling you how to do something. You don't necessarily need to be able to identify things if you've got decent vision processing and it can actually point things out from previous examples. So for me, that's the most exciting. But then again, there's obviously getting back to the important, absolutely current day things. And as you say, security and privacy concerns. Again, those are things that aren't unique, though, to the AI ML space. I mean, there's anonymization of data, but, it all starts by protecting data. And pretty much everyone is terrible at protecting data and protecting privacy. And, but before I propose anything, difficult and abstruse, why don't we just start preventing all the data breaches that are forever happening?
Right. No, well said. Well said. Josh, your closing thoughts on that.
I think, certainly protecting data from a privacy standpoint is critical. I think from a security standpoint, we're starting to see, the concepts of deep fakes and being able to recognize poison data, I think, and building in the adversarial protections to make models more robust. I think to vulnerabilities and risks and threats, I think is going to become more prevalent and expected. I think it'll be interesting to see how this regulation story unfolds, especially the international harmonization of some of the things that we touched on earlier in terms of the risk areas and the ethical use of AI. It certainly is a global competition or race right now with some of our, I would say, adversaries, but also in terms of putting in place regulations associated with this. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out and how that affects what AI solution providers are required to produce as part of their solution. If you think about, we talked about security, we talked about privacy. If you think about explaining fairness, how was the model trained? What data was it used? Are there inherent bias, unconscious bias, or unbiased towards different communities? Can you explain what the model, how it works, what framework was used, how the results were produced, and then, like I said earlier, the postmortem side of it. I think you're going to see a lot more rigor in terms of how the models were tested. I think that's an area or a space in terms of testing not only the functionality of the model, but the performance of the model, and how that continual testing loop takes place throughout its life cycle. And then I touched on it briefly, the third-party risks. I think you're seeing this in other technology spaces as well, but the vendors, the partners, the data providers, I think you're going to have to take a hard look at where you're getting your technologies from and put in place the governance standards to make sure that you have the controls in place. And I think all solutions are going to be required to provide these in the future at some level or some degree, whether that's voluntary or through some sort of compliance type of to use the carrot stick, the stick side of the solution.
Mark, you want to say something, sir? Thank you, Josh.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the very unfortunate things is how well AI can use large quantities of data. I point in particular to Cambridge Analytica. With AI, you can micro-target things. You can definitely sway public opinion. You can get involved in politics. In one sense, for me, this is one of the biggest security and privacy concerns. Not allowing enough information to get into the wrong hands to get inside a given human's decision loop. We already have lots of instances like YouTube, where literally the algorithm is programming human beings. And to me, that's the biggest security concern. And it's based on privacy, because you can't do things like that without what should be private personal data.
Right. No, those are great points. And yeah, like I had mentioned earlier, I mean, what an exciting time to be part of this, and how fast it's moving, and again, to kind of see what's next around the corner. So with that said, we are out of time. We do have one Q&A real quick. Let me get this real fast, and I'll open this up to both Mark or Josh. And this is I'm going to mispronounce the last name, so I do apologize. What are your thoughts for any legal implications for the AI in government? Can you get that out?
So AI is really similar to weapons systems. It should have the same checks and balances in place. It should have the same chains of responsibility in place. There are some faults with assigning blame for some weapon systems, but it's a process that we've sort of perfected, or at least made better over the years. And it shouldn't be that we're starting de novo doing the same thing for AI.
Josh, any thoughts there? Thank you, Mark.
I heard I attended an event at South by Southwest one time. I think it might have been Secretary Carter that said this, but the response the AI did it is not going to fly in any type of legal proceedings. And I think to all the points that Mark made and the points that I made earlier about being able to provide the insight and information that went into the design and the engineering of the solution, and then also the controls that you put on the back end side of it in production are going to become even more critical in a litigious world that we live in. So,
no, well said, Josh. And I think it was Mike Duke that was here last time that mentioned, how do you algorithm morality, right? How do you, you get that to the next level? And thank you for the great question. Thank you for the great answers. Well, guys, listen, thank you so much. We are both honored and blessed again to have Mr. Josh Elliott, the COO of Modsy. I encourage you guys to reach out to Josh to hear more about Modsy and how his company can help you into the next level of AI. And then Mark Wazer, thank you so much again, sir. It's great to see you again. Again, please reach out to Mark, anything AI related. He is a subject matter expert, to say the least. To the audience members that asked, this will be on YouTube. We'll have a live link to it, or I'm sorry, a recorded link to it on social media, on our LinkedIn page as well. So you guys will be able to access this conversation at any time. So Josh, Mark, thank you again so much for your time today. Certainly wish you guys the best of luck.
thank you, Mike. Thanks, Mark. Great talk.
All right, guys. Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.